So let's get straight into it. Let's talk Wandering In. So this morning I read chapters 5 through 8 of the Wandering In, so 4 chapters again, same as last week. I was thinking about trying to read some more today to try and get to the first interlude, but unfortunately my schedule is a little tight today as I've got a load of things to do this afternoon. So let's get straight into it. Chapter 5 is the one. So in chapter 5, we're kind of continuing from the previous week, and Erin is trying to kind of make the inn a bit livable. She's trying to use her basic cooking skill to make some bread, and so this chapter is very much familiar. So if you've read these first few chapters, which you must have done if you're watching this, we're still on like innkeeper, like cleaning, tidying, and I think that because the character of Erin is so kind of like relatable and fun, I really enjoyed this chapter. It must have been wild to be reading this as it came out. I mean, I know I'm reading the new version, so I did see in the comments that the new version has actually not been ebooked and has not been audiobooked. So if you want to read, Pirate Arbor's preferred version of the opening to the story, the only way to do that currently is via the website, which is the way that I'm reading it. You can also read that for 100% free. So if you're watching this and thinking, if you're, say, for example, a fan of my content and you're like, I'd like to read The Wandering In, you can read this for 100% free. But very unlikely that anyone who's not already on board with this series is watching this, so let's move. So yeah, chapter 5 is very much kind of like more kind of skill building and things like that. Chapter 6 is where the Wandering In like kicks into gear again for me. So in chapter 6 you get the guardsman, Relk the Drake, and I don't know if there's a pronunciation guide for the Wandering In, but I feel like I want to just say like club or clutch, the ant guy. They come to the inn. So in the previous chapter, you get a small kind of interlude, I guess. Not a proper interlude, because the Wandering In does have like full chapter interludes. But you get this little interlude where you see some guards in the nearby city, and they talk about sending Clutch and Relk to go and investigate the smoke because Erin has been able to start a fire. Now, I think the first thing I want to say is that I think Pirate Arbor's description of the two guardsmen is so good. I feel like I had like a really strong impression of how they looked, how they spoke, and I really like the different characters. So Relk obviously has kind of like a very kind of laid back, very open personality. He almost reminded me a little bit of like Michelangelo from the Ninja Turtles. Like he was down to chat, he wanted to have some food, he liked meeting Erin, and then you've got Clubch, the ant guy, who is a lot more reserved and he's a lot more formal. And he's obviously a lot more professional in his role as a guardsman. There's lots of really interesting things in this chapter that you get to learn. So you learn about how people can multi-class. So, for example, both of the guards have ranks in their weapons, the spear and the sword, but they also have ranks in guard. Although it's not, he said, Clubs says it's not their primary skill. So I thought that was interesting. Also that everyone in the world levels, and they all level in the same way, so they understand. So basically, they like complete an action, and then as they go to sleep, they hear a notification about the leveling that they have done that day. And I like that the guards guys talk about how annoying it is when you level up because Erin's annoyed every time because it happens just as she's falling asleep. Um, so that was all really good. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this is like the first time I've read a book that is kind of this explicit about like levels and classes and stuff like that. But I really like how it's integrated into their society, so it doesn't feel like you're reading a video game where everyone is commenting on leveling up. It feels like it is part of their society. It's part of their daily life. And it's very funny that they're kind of confused. Like, why don't you know anything about anything? Because Erin's obviously from our world and not from theirs. So I really enjoy. I really like that. I think that chapter had been giving me what I was missing from the Wandering Inn, which was character interaction. And Pirate Arbor has not only managed to do some character interaction, but she also introduced two new characters that are really interesting and are also very different from Erin. So I think that was really, really good, and I really liked that. And we actually also meet another character later on, but I'll go through chapter 8 first. So it's quite talking about chapter 8. Sorry. So talking about chapter 6, which is the chapter where you meet Relk and Klutch. I'm sure somebody in the comments can tell me how to pronounce that, unless he's like never in it again. But I don't know. I bet you there's so much that I have missed in that conversation that like pays off later on. Because also, like, why would you rewrite earlier sections if there was no payoff? Do you know what I mean? But seeing Klutch give Erin the healing potion to heal her poisoned hand, and he's like, oh yeah, it's nothing, and then it turns out later on that it's like extremely, extremely valuable, and like irreplaceable. I thought that was really interesting, and it I think it foreshadowed that obviously the qualities of the character, so like how nice and generous and like thoughtful and whatever they are, but also probably foreshadows that we're going to see them again quite a bit. And they are in the next chapter as well. So yeah, really enjoyed that one. I think that I really want to see more of these characters. I thought that the world building that was done in that chapter was really good. So Relk talks about the difference between lizard men and drakes and dragons, and the Klutch, who's he's an ant person, but he's an Antimian, which is the name of their race. And there's also, it's quite interesting because they talk about, I think it might be in the next chapter, but there's like something about Klutch that maybe like people don't like. So I'd be interested to see what's going on there and to hear more about his race. And there's an interesting part as well, which feels a bit like foreshadowing or world building, whatever, where Relk says, "Oh, you bastard," and Klutch is like, "Oh yeah, well, you're right in one definition of that word." So there's definitely something going on with him, and Klutch feels like there's a lot more to tell with his character. So I'm excited to see more from him later. The next chapter, Erin finds out about the poisonous nature of some of the blue fruit that she's been eating. So she gives herself food poisoning, and then she sees some goblins. Oh, first off, she makes a basket. So she uses her crafting skill to make a basket, which is cool, because she's leveled up at the end of the previous chapter. So she uses her crafting skill to make a basket, and she's trying to carry the blue fruits back, and she eats one, and then she's like violently ill, as if she's been food poisoned. And then one of the fish in the river that she throws up into eats her vomit, and it dies. So she realizes that it's something she ate, and then but then she's like, oh, I've eaten hundreds of these blue fruits or whatever. Obviously, they're not all poisonous. But she sees the goblin band again, including the smart goblin, the little girl goblin. and she sees them sorting the fruits. One of the goblins has a scavenger and a scavenger class and a detect poison skill, which is really interesting. I wonder if Erin will unlock that sort of stuff in the future. But this other goblin looks at all the fruit and separates the good ones from the bad and leaves the bad ones behind. And then the little goblin looks at those fruits, the bad fruits, and she looks at what a good fruit, and she manages to discern for herself which ones are good and which ones are bad. And Erin, watching her, gives her the idea to then do the same. So she says it takes her embarrassingly longer than it took the goblin, which is funny. But she eventually works out which fruits are good, which fruits are bad, and she then chooses. Is able to cart a load of just the good fruits back to the inn. So then she gets back to the inn, and as she does, she's sorting and cleaning and whatnot. And then there's like another knock at the door, and she's like, "Oh, is it the guards? Because they said they would come back." But it's actually like a giant, like scary monster with like a skull and like flaming eyes and stuff. And she's like, she tries to force it and stop it from coming in, and then eventually, I think this might be into the next chapter now. So into the next chapter, she like hits it with the cauldron, and the illusion disappears, and it turns out that it's just like a skinny young lad, and he speaks all fancy and like he's got like a very like big loquacious vocabulary, and she's like, "Oh, you sound like an idiot," and eventually you find out that he's a wizard, and so he's casting a spell to make himself appear as a monster to try and scare her into giving him free food. But she eventually, when she hits him with the pot, she's like, "I'll hit you again," and he's like, "Oh, let me give you some money to like say sorry." And he gives her a load of money, and she's like, "Well, you've paid now, so why don't you eat?" So they eat a meal together, and then he like kind of talks a little bit about himself, says that his name is Pisces, and that he's a wizard, and they kind of have like a little chat, and then Pisces like reveals that Pisces like reveals that he's like going basically like without saying as much, like going around and scaring people into giving him food, and Erin's like, "Oh, that's kind of a shitty thing to do," and she gives him some blue fruit, and he's like, "This is poisonous," and then she like teaches him how to find out that it's not poisonous, and he eats loads. And like he's quite an interesting character, because Pisces is very much like he's like a con man, like a magic con man, and like obviously his like over the top vocabulary is like part of the whole kind of wizard con man thing. I'm a big fan of like characters like John Constantine who kind of fit into this mold. Pisces is currently kind of played for laughs almost, so I'd be interested to see how his character develops as it goes on. I think that Pisces is like, I've read almost nothing about the Wandering Inn, but I'm pretty certain that I've heard people talk about Pisces, so I assume he's going to be important as time goes on. It's interesting as well that Erin describes him as being like skinny and his robes hanging off him, which obviously means that he's not very good at using magic to scare people into giving him food. But it's funny nonetheless to see what's going down with him. In terms of story development, there's definitely, he talks a little bit about how humans aren't particularly welcome in the area, and how maybe she shouldn't trust the Drakes, from the city, from Lisgore, which is where the guards both come from. And also there's kind of like a bit of a we check in on the guards as well during this chapter on Relk and Klutch, and they're about to clock out and go back to the inn because they both really want to see Erin again. Well, it seems like maybe there's some kind of attraction or something going on there. They talk about it at the end of their chapter that like how they're not, neither of them are attracted to human women, and they both kind of seem like they might be. But they're both desperate to go back, and they clock out of work to go, and then their shift commander is like, no, you can't leave, there's a bar fight. And so they aren't able to go to the inn, so they don't go there when Pisces is there, which is probably also important for that character relationship, because they're a sword slayer and spearmaster, like they could probably just take him out straight away. And maybe they'd even see through the illusion. So yeah, it'd be funny to see if those characters eventually interact. I'm sure they will. There's, another 12 million words to read. But yeah, all in all, 4 really good chapters, and I kind of expected. So when I was reading chapter 5, the first one I read this week, I was like, oh, we're going to carry on with the same kind of stuff that we had the previous week, last week with chapters 1 through 4, but these latest batch of chapters having all this character interaction has made them even more interesting. So I'm loving Wandering In so far. I really like the personalities of the characters that we've met, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more character interaction. And I want to see what's going on with the little goblin, because it feels like the little goblin is learning skills in the same way that Erin is learning them, but that maybe the other goblins don't learn them. Like they kind of like have innate skills, like the scavenger goblin, but they seem confused that she's learning. So there's definitely something going on there, and I'm looking forward to reading more of that. Maybe that'll be what the interlude's about. So next week, if I can read the same amount of 4 chapters, I'll get to my first interlude. So I think we've got next week it's 6, 7 interlude. Oh no, I've read 5 through 8. So yeah, next week I'll get to an interlude. I don't know which chapter it comes after. Do I have it open? I don't have it open. Don't have the list open. But yeah, it'll be my first interlude next week. So really interested to see that. I don't know obviously how long or how short it's going to be. Maybe that'll warrant its own video separately, because there might be something that people would want to see. So if you're following the series and you'd like me to split out the interludes into separate videos, if for example there's like 2 chapters then an interlude, then I could just put up 2 videos that day maybe. So let me know if you think that, as Wandering In fans, splitting out the interludes so people could come back to them or search them specifically. Let me know. Otherwise, may just kind of bunch them all together into one video. Thanks again for watching. If you've been, you have to watch to have seen this. If you like the video, please like it. Please drop down into the comments and have a chat with me about this week's chapters. Obviously, I haven't read forward, so please don't spoil anything from later chapters. But it'd be great to chat with more Wandering In fans. Last week's video had loads of great comments, it's been really nice to have this series start running. Although I will be out this evening, possibly, when this posts, but I will definitely reply to all your comments. Just might not be instant. So thanks again for watching. Please share this with other people who've read The Wandering In, other fans. And I will speak to you guys tomorrow for the weekly update, or next week if you're just here for Wandering In videos, which I completely understand. Thanks so much, and I'll speak to you soon.